I think that's one of the paradoxes of being a father. Our job is to get our kids ready for when we're not around. It's a paradox, but that's really, I feel like that's the core of our goal. If we're not there and they're successful, we've done our job to a large degree.
Welcome to the Fathering Strong podcast. Each week, we have an interesting conversation with dads, fatherhood practitioners, and experts on matters of importance to men and fathers. Thanks for joining us. With today's episode, here's your Fathering Strong podcast host, Eli Williams.
Well, hello, friends, and welcome to another installment of the Fathering Strong podcast. Glad that you are with us today. And my guest today is Sam Treadaway. Let me get your name right. Treadaway.
Mm-hmm.
Treadaway, yes. So glad that you took the time to join us today for a conversation on the
Well, it's my pleasure.
podcast.
My pleasure.
Appreciate it very much. You're a friend of Bruce Stapleton, who, as our regulars know, is the brains behind the Fathering Strong podcast and always in the background. So he told me a little bit about the fact that you guys are friends, you were roommates in college and all of that. So I'm excited to talk with you. So as we normally do, Sam, I want to start by asking you about your fatherhood story. And let's begin with your life growing up as little Sam in the Treadaway household. What was your relationship like with your dad?
My relationship with my father is complicated. My father, even before little Sammy was around, really struggled with alcoholism. And so that was a huge part of our family and of my upbringing, and was obviously a big part of my relationship with my father. There's in my family, I'm the oldest of two boys, but we're very similar in age, 18 months apart. So my father ducked in and out of our lives, depending on his status. And in between those, we were very itinerant, I guess, very, very transient. And so a lot of my forming was centered on one thing that I could count on, and that was my mother, because honestly, I could not count on my father because of the struggles he had. Actually, it was, and his issues with alcohol, I found as I grew older, but I didn't know this as a child, were really a symptom of a larger problem, which is probably not that unusual. But when I was young, I thought alcohol was the problem. If you get rid of alcohol, everything's fixed. And but I learned later on that was just a symptom of a much bigger problem that he was dealing with. To my father's credit, he struggled with it, and he found Alcoholics Anonymous. My dad was a talker. His name was Bob. When Bob Treadaway walked into the room, everybody just lit up. He was very social, and that was a good thing. But one of the problems is that I think because he was so vivacious, so such a great communicator with other people, I don't think they realized how much he was unlike that when he wasn't in that room. And so our family struggled with that because, Bob Treadaway, he couldn't be like that. He couldn't have had those kind of struggles and things.
Now let me ask you a question about that.
Yeah.
Are you saying he wasn't as communicative with you and your siblings as he was when he was out being social?
Yes, correct. He was physically abusive. Especially if there was any kind of friction, which in social settings you don't really deal with the friction that much, And he was in sales, and he was excellent. He was excellent at that kind of communicating, but deep conversations he struggled with, and so one of the things that it impacted too, and your viewers and listeners may be familiar with the family trap model, where that's where the word enabler came from. The idea that when there's someone dealing with a particular issue, others around them in the family tend to take on roles. And as the oldest, I definitely see that looking backwards. I see those roles playing out in my mom and me and my younger brother. But he, as he got older, and as I got older, he Alcoholics Anonymous was an outlet that really helped him. Especially, he became a sponsor of other gentlemen struggling with substance abuse, and I think he helped them, but I know it helped him to talk about his history, and he's a talker, and that's how he processed things, and so that was very, very helpful. But that impacted me as a child quite a bit because, for example, I never invited anyone over to the house because I never knew what they were going to walk into. He could be passed out on the sofa or even worse. So, and I mentioned the family trap model because that's not uncommon. When there's dysfunctionality in the home, you tend to want to isolate everything outside the home so that there's a barrier there, and it impacts your development.
Yeah. So did you kind of indicated there were some other issues and that the alcoholism was just a symptom of something deeper going on. Did he come from alcoholic parents?
No, no. His parents, very rural. The alcohol was never in the home there. But he was the older of two. He had a younger sister, has a younger sister. My father passed away about 10 years ago. And he was the one that was doted on. He, going back to fathering and parenting,
Yeah.
he had the easy route to a fault. And so when he made mistakes in his developmental life, I didn't know this as a kid, though I know it now. So he didn't have a lot of chance to practice overcoming challenges because his parents tended to take care of those things for him.
They rescued him.
Yes, 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 yes.
Yeah.
And which also drove a barrier between him and his sibling because she was not afforded those kind of lifelines. She was, and as a result, she fostered. I mean, she prospered rather as an adult because she knew how to handle challenges that we all.
Yeah, and lots of lessons here for fathers. It is important not to rescue your children to the point where they don't learn how to deal with their challenges, their failures. You know what I mean? The barriers that they come against.
I'm sure that impacted how I was as a father too, because we tend to overcorrect. And we can talk about that in a few minutes.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm sure there was a latent kind of, I don't want my kids to have that kind of situation.
Yeah. I see that a lot. And often it's very, very positive when fathers grow up in a home in which they were neglected or abused or abandoned. They make it up in their mind they're never going to be that kind of father, and they do just the opposite. And it turns out really well for some of them because they just do everything their father didn't do.
You want to break the cycle. You definitely want to break the cycle.
Yeah, exactly. So does some of that come into play with the way you raised your kids?
Oh, absolutely. I should tell you that I was a high school teacher after college, and I should say this: for me, college was an especially welcome part of my life because I really needed to leave the home. I needed to get away from some of those things, and college gave me respite. It was a fresh start, at least during the week when I was at college. It was certainly not out of mind, but it was at least out of sight. It wasn't in front of me all day, every day. So, and then after college, I was a teacher, high school teacher and coach, and so I mention that because I had a lot of experience working with parents and kids, students, before I was a father myself. Uh, that was instructive as well. The working with families and I was the kind of teacher that really wanted to get to know my students, and beyond just the classroom setting. And so anyway, I saw what to me seemed to be positive ways to be a parent and especially a father, and maybe some things I learned by seeing examples of how not to do as well.
Mhm.
So that was instructive for me.
So let's talk about your journey of
Hmm.
fatherhood.
Hmm.
Tell us
Hmm.
about how did you become a father for the first time?
Uh, we have two boys. Our first came along, and we uh, we had first of all, we knew we wanted two children. That was one of those things that we had long conversations about even before marriage. So that was one of those things that we didn't leave to happenstance or whatever. We knew that we wanted a family, but we knew we wanted two children. Our first son, we have two sons. Our first son came along, and he it's this sounds silly to even talk about, but we really worked hard at trying to time our family, which is folly. We know that because I was so involved with school and coaching and all that kind of thing. And our first son came around just as timed. The second one, we thought we had everything figured out. We couldn't really have things figured out. The second one proved us wrong. But
Yeah.
so we had two boys. And one of the struggles that I dealt with, and this is not uncommon, at least I know the world of education. I was a teacher and then a school administrator, principal forever, and then I've worked my way down. I'm on the school board now, but so I know that field, and I know one of the common things, and this is probably not uncommon in the ministry too, Reverend, but there's one of the things I dealt with as a father was the struggle of spending my time with my kids or with other people's kids.
Mm.
And I felt guilty no matter what, it seemed like. And uh, that was one of the things early on as a father. Our oldest son, first words, his first sentence was "Daddy gone ball game" because I was
Oh
coaching.
my.
Yeah. And that was a sign. That was a
Yeah,
sign.
not a good one.
No, not a good one. But at the same token, I felt guilty when I wasn't doing, you can't be in two places and all that. But that was one of the things I struggled with mightily. I was very fortunate to, my wife, Risa, was such a great mother and very flexible. And she also was very involved at the school. Our kids saw public service through us. And that was one of the things that was important to us. One of the things I found out through teaching and coaching is modeling works. It really does work.
Yes.
It's not 100%, nothing's 100%, but modeling things does, we may not see the results of it immediately, but modeling I knew was an effective way of carrying on those kind of traits that you found as positive core principles. Um, One of the things that I saw through my educational career was the family that my dad grew up in, where the parents did a lot of rescuing.
Mhm.
You hear about the helicopter parents.
Right.
I'm talking more about the snowplow parents.
Yeah.
They got everything out of the way of the kid,
Yeah.
and it was important to me that our boys learned responsibility and how to handle things on their own. I think that's one of the paradoxes of being a father or a parent in general. Our job is to get our kids ready for when we're not around. And
Yes.
it's a paradox, but that's really, I feel like that's the core of our goal. I feel like if we're not there and they're successful, we've done our job to a large degree. And I think with some parents feel like, anyway, the snow plow's not always there to get everything out of the way. And so that's when they really challenge. They're really challenged. Um,
Yeah.
when ours were young, um, some of the things that I did as a father is I was very chores was a big part of fathering for me, and it was through chores that I wanted our boys to know responsibility. Uh, early on, they were given a clothes hamper, and it was their job to wash their own clothes. For example, we did not give allowances for chores. We wanted them to understand that the things that you do around the house was part of being the family. It was not a monetary exchange kind of thing. They did get an allowance, a small allowance, but that was for them to learn how to budget money. I mean, that was the role
Mhm.
of that. It wasn't
Mhm.
for exchange of chores and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
The
Very wise.
well, I I just feel like there's whether it's a marriage or a family, I feel like it's real important that you you have to put in to take out, and uh, that was an important part of our parenting. And the other thing is we we being Risa and I, my wife, we had long conversations about these things, and we weren't necessarily on the same page all the time about those, for example, those responsibilities and those chores.
Nobody is.
But it was important that we had those conversations outside of our children, and that we were not necessarily united, but we were at least in the same book. If we're all on the same page, that was important, and that was very intentional because I had been in many parent conferences at schools where it was obvious the parents were not on the same page, and as a result, they got further and further apart because they tried to offset the other, and the kid's caught in the middle, and that really was problematic. So that was one of the things that we tried to do. Um,
So what was your biggest challenge in raising that first son? What's his name? I don't think I got
Tyler,
his Tyler.
Tyler,
What was
yeah,
your biggest challenge in raising Tyler?
Tyler. Our two boys are very different in some ways similar, and not unlike most children siblings. Tyler was a very easy one early on, and was a little bit more of a challenge as he got older. The younger one, if he had been the first, he may have been the only one because he was such a challenge as a real young kid. But Tyler was really an easy infant, young, even as a young boy, he was very easy. Uh, we had more, not necessarily challenges, but we had to spend a little more energy and time and investment as he got, say, to middle school years and things like that. Um, whereas Dave, our second son, he was a very challenging preschooler, very independent, very independent. Uh, he really struggled with the word no, and that was an important word for our, one of the things that was important too in my fathering mindset, which kind of goes back to talking about how to handle challenges in life and all that, is um, I wanted our family I wanted as a father to foster an environment where they could practice being adults, if that makes sense. Practice on those, not having adult expectations, but having a place where they can practice being an adult to learn the right and wrong way to do that.
You mean when it comes to decision making and that
Yes,
kind of thing?
yes, yes, yes.
Responsibility.
Yes, there was a safety net, like any child needs is a safety net, but we gave them a certain amount of freedom or rope or whatever, analogy you want to make, so that they could learn from those good decisions, but even more importantly, from those poor decisions. And so that was a big part of our parenting for both of them. The One of the things that was a challenge, and this is not these aren't unusual, these are pretty universal to some degree, was parity. They were very different. So parenting them, being the father of each of one of those, there was always like, you don't want to treat them the same because they're not the same, but you want to be comparable enough to where they understand that they're both loved and valued just as much. I saw that as a teacher as well, unfortunately, where one child was treated very differently than the other, and the other always knew that. That was one of the things that we struggled with that, but at times because they were very different. No two children are the same, but we tried to, as best we could, to be comparable with the same expectations, and that was we. Another thing I learned through, I know I keep coming back to school, but that really did help me as a parent to see other parents, how they had done things. To me, when I say the word no, what I really mean is boundaries. And I found that children in the classroom or on the playing field or at home, they really want to know where those boundaries are. And no was one of the ways that we kind of set those boundaries. And we have a dog here. We live in the middle of the woods. We're very out there. And so our dog, we have an invisible fence, one of those wireless fences and that kind of thing. And our dog knows exactly where that line is. And he doesn't have to have his correction collar on anymore. He knows where that boundary is. And that was one of the things we worked hard. And that's where being consistent, I think, between mom and dad, those boundaries are not nebulous. They're not fuzzy. They're as concrete and as definitive as we could make them, so that they knew where those lines were and those boundaries and expectations is maybe a better way to say it. This may sound odd. We didn't talk a lot about consequences. We didn't talk a lot about the whole, if you do this, this will happen. I found in working with teachers, the more you concentrate, the more focus you have on the consequences, the more the implied expectation is, I expect you not to comply. If I'm talking to students about, if you chew gum in class, you're going to get this. And if you do it again, you're going to get this. And if you do it again, what's the assumption? The assumption is, I expect you to break the rule that you're not supposed to chew gum in class. So we found that it was effective for us as a father and as parents to not focus more on the expectations and less on the consequences. That was our job, to pick the consequence. It wasn't our job to form a social contract with them about, if you do that, this is happening, that type of thing. And I remember an example of our older son. He had just started driving, and so he took a couple of his buddies and they went to a ball game or something. I can't remember now. And then afterwards, they talked him into going to go get a hamburger. I don't remember what it was, but it was later than he should have been out. And I remember him walking in the house. This was right before cell phones, so it was no way to reach out to him or anything like that. And I remember he walked in we were in the den, and he walked in and walked over to me. he stuck out his hand, and I put my hand out. He dropped the car keys in my hand. No conversations needed. He knew he was grounded. I mean, we didn't have to talk about how long or anything like that, but uh, that's that seemed to work for me. Is that it was a sign to me that okay, at least with that particular expectation, we were on the same page. I didn't have to tell him he was grounded. He knew before he walked in the door that was what was going to be the case, and so um, and it taught some responsibility. I mean, that was which is again part of our job is not to get in the way of these things as much as to help them learn to do it on their own.
Now that was Tyler or
That was
Dave.
Tyler, our older one. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So he's the easy one.
He was the easy one, younger. Yeah.
So
He wasn't a challenge, but he was very affable. He was one of those great kids that laughed and played all the time. So he was a little bit easier. Dave, Tyler wound up. He's a teacher now. And a coach. And our younger one, the one that was difficult and very independent, is an attorney. So that makes some sense.
So, tell me some ways in which Dave was a bit more challenging than Tyler.
Oh, he was one of those that, especially as a preschooler, the more you told him no, the more he saw that as a direct challenge to his independence. And so, he was not passive aggressive; he was aggressive. And yeah, that he wasn't sneaky. It wasn't like he was trying to do things, clandestinely or anything like that. He just defied you, and you never knew where it was coming. That was one of the things that with Tyler, we kind of knew where he was. Dave was very. You could ask him to do something, he'd do it 99 out of 100 times, and that one time out of 100, it's like, what? Where did this come from? This tirade come from? And but he grew out of it and became, very successful. But yeah, he was just a challenge in that he saw any kind of correction or what he considered an unnecessary boundary as just, okay, now I know the line I have to step over. That was the way he saw it. And to be fair, we never saw that at school. It was always at home. In fact, when we talked with teachers about him, they were like, really, this is not the same David we saw, at home sometimes. But he was a challenge. And one of the things that I have found is that we tend to think that children are impatient. They are very patient. We are the ones impatient. We want immediate change or immediate compliance or whatever the word is, whatever the situation is. And they are very good at wearing us down if we're not consistent, on the same page, have a unified message, that type of thing. There's forgive me, I'm rambling. So you put some boundaries on me anytime you need to.
Well, I'm quiet because I'm listening.
Okay, good. Well, and I'm probably going to butcher it. I'm paraphrasing, but there's a quote from Thomas Jefferson where he said, "In matters of style, swim with the currents. In matters of principle, stand like a rock." And I think that was one of the things as a father I tried to be, is to identify, is this a core principle or is this just the fad of the day, and picking our battles where we're not spending our energy on these things that don't matter, that give them some freedom and some, creativity, areas of creativity, but not losing sight of the core values. For example, research has shown that if you teach manners first, we tend to, the student or the child tends to learn to respect others. For example, if you hold the door for someone behind you, if you teach that first, the implied message that they internalize is that person has, I respect that person enough to hold the door for them. Mm-hmm. Whereas if we just talk about respect, it becomes fuzzy. It's, I mean, I don't, it's amorphous. But when we learn some habits that visually and concretely display that respect, it's internalized more. And so those were some of those things that we tried to work on with,
Yeah.
our kids. And the other thing, Pastor,
That's the saying that some things are better caught than taught.
yes, yes, agreed. The I'm catching myself up. One of the things when I go into schools to when I'm coaching new administrators and all that, I call it the pronoun test. If I go into schools and everybody's talking about I do this, I do that, it sometimes it's disconcerting to me. I'd rather than say we do this, we do that. And so I know we're talking about fathering, and I realize it was a blessing to have a co-parent, and that's not always the case. But
Right.
forgive me if I'm talking about we a lot, because it was definitely a team effort, and
Mhm.
we had lots of huddling,
Right.
and that was so important for us anyway, that we did not confuse our sons. In fact, one of the big no-nos in our household was asking one parent something, getting a no, and then going to the other parent.
Yes.
That was unacceptable. That was a big deal. Is that we are one voice, and if you ask one, you've asked the other. I mean, that we are on the same page. Even if I disagreed, it doesn't matter. The bigger, the more concrete or the more core principle here is that we are co-parenting. We are together. We're going to get through this together, and trying to drive a wedge between us is not acceptable.
Yeah, that's very, very smart to be that way, because what we don't want to do is teach our children how to manipulate other people.
Absolutely.
And if they
Absolutely.
sense any daylight between what
Oh,
mom and
absolutely.
dad say or
Absolutely.
believe, they've got wiggle room and they will use it. They will exploit it to the max. Is that right?
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
And I would say, and this I think is important in parenting and fathering, that extends to the church, to the school, the adults in that child's life. I found the child definitely benefited when all of the adults that child is involved with, are they on the same page? No, but they are coming at things from the right same angle, let's say. Um, and that's where I hated it, when the teacher and or like I said, at church or whatever, that preschool, whatever the setting is, it's important to try to understand that if the teacher tells you, my mom had a saying, the teacher's right 99% of the time, and that other 1% won't hurt you. In other words,
Yeah.
I've got their back. You don't need to even come home complaining about what the teacher did to me, because they're right, you're wrong. They're on the same page. The adults are on the same page. Same way with church, or whether it was, the Sunday school, it didn't matter. It just didn't matter. The adults were right. I have to work with it. That was part of my background. And that was, I think, one of the things that we were trying to be consistent with as parents as well.
Very good, Sam. You are sharing a lot of wisdom
How about that?
for our audience, and it's really appreciated. We're going to continue our conversation after a short timeout, so stay with us. We'll be back. This is the Fathering Strong podcast. My guest today is Sam Treadaway. We'll continue our conversation right after this.
A recent survey of the greatest needs of fathers determined that many of them want to learn how to be the best dads they can be. This includes seeking advice on fatherhood, parenting skills, and understanding their role in a child's life. We're happy to announce the new Fathering Strong book and suite of resources that includes a workbook, 30-day devotional and journal, and workshop materials. Written by Fathering Strong's Bruce Stapleton, this package provides everything you need for your personal growth as the spiritual leader of your home. Get more information at thefatheringstrongbook.com. Purchase the materials wherever books are sold.
Thank you so much for being with us today for this installment of the Fathering Strong podcast. I'm Eli Williams, and my guest is Sam Treadaway. Sam, you really have a lot of good things to share when it comes to parenting, and your two boys have grown up. One's a teacher and one's an attorney, which is a testament to the job that you and your wife Risa, if I got that right,
That's
did
right.
in raising them. As a teacher and then administrator, tell me some of the biggest, what shall I say, are mistakes that parents made that impacted uh, the children that you taught that were in your schools. What would you say was the number one thing, if there's one, the number one mistake that parents made when it comes to their children and education?
Yeah. We've alluded to some of the things is one is that, if there's two parents involved, it really is important that they talk about parenting and fathering and mothering outside of the child. I think that's really important. And again, not having to be on the exact same page because we're all different and our expectations are going to be a little different. There's going to be a fudge factor there. But I saw that. I could tell you how many parent conferences a kid had, let's just say a kid had made a poor decision. And so the parents come in and we have a conversation about it. And you've got one parent who is adamantly supporting their child. I can't tell you how many times my child would never lie to me. I saw what the kid did, but that parent was, and they were coming from a place of truth. I mean, in at least is that couldn't have happened because my child would never lie to me. And then what happens is then you have another parent that understands that their child made a poor decision, and so now they just keep trying to offset the other. And the kid is, like I said, now the kid has divided the adults in their life. Um, Very mixed message. In fact, maybe the message is, I drive a wedge and I'm off scot-free kind of thing. I saw that quite often. One of the things too is that kids, I saw this quite a bit too. Teachers and parents thought that they both saw the same kid. In other words, they saw that the parents assumed that the kid at school was the same kid that they saw at home. And the parent or the teachers assumed at home it's the same child as the one they had in their classroom. And we all know humans adapt to different, environments and settings and things like that. And so there was a lot of times that I felt like teachers weren't listening because, yeah, okay, you are an expert on that kid in the classroom or the classroom setting, but like my teachers didn't know the kind of home I left every morning. I mean, you can't know all these things, but there's this assumption that that the same child is that you're assuming that child is going to behave and is coming from the same place no matter what the setting, and that's just not true. I mean, we're all adapting whether we mean to or not to whatever the setting is that we're in at the time and where we're coming from. So
So what's the solution to that? What's the solution?
I think just to listen to each other. I don't, uh, I think we educators all too often go into a conversation with parents thinking we have all the answers and not listening. You think about a typical parent conference, it's either in the office or in the classroom, so it's on the educator's turf. You have parents, if both parents are able to attend, you've got two parents, you might have six teachers there or six staff members. So there's inequity built, and I found I was frustrated when I didn't feel like I was frustrated when I didn't feel like our school was being inviting to our parents, especially those kids that came from homes where their parents' school was not a good setting. So they're going into a place that was not a good. Most teachers enjoyed school. That's why they went into teaching. That's a big reason. we enjoyed school, and a lot of our parents did not. And so I just think listening to each other and coming from a place where we trust that we want what's best for the kid, for the student or the child, assuming good things, that we all want that child to be successful. Uh, we just may be looking at it from a different perspective. Every once in a while, I would actually, if we had a contentious kind of parent situation, uh, I would put an object in the middle of the table, and I would remind them that we're all looking at the same object, but we're looking at it from a different angle around the table. This the child is the same way. It's the same child, but we're seeing a different version of that child depending on the setting that that we see them in.
In a perfect world, would it be a good idea for teachers to make at least one home visit to every child's home?
I think that would be good. One of the things um, that we did at our school for a while, where I was principal, we did student-led conferencing, and so the parents were invited in. It would be in an evening. The parents were invited in, and instead of the teachers going through the curriculum or whatever, we would make a space for the student and the parents to, and the student was in charge of going over the material to show the parents what they had been working on, what they learned, and that type of thing. So we practiced on presentation skills. It wasn't just academic skill. We worked on a lot of those kind of things. And so at the end of the thing, the parents were to write a reflection piece, just one page kind of reflection, and sign it and that kind of thing. And then we would have the kids the next day write a thank you note for their parents for coming in. We tried to involve some social skills and that kind of thing. But one of the things we noticed is that there were a lot of parents that wanted to take the form home and fill it out at home. What we found out is that the parents struggled with reading and writing themselves. And so they wanted to take it home, have someone else do it for them, and bring it in because they were embarrassed, especially in front of their own child, that they could not write a good reflection piece and submit it for them. And so that came to mind when you was talking about home visits. There's just a lot that we need to listen to, and to and if we listen, if we assume good intentions, I think that goes a long way to helping the child in the long run.
Now, in your teaching and as an administrator, were these urban schools? Were they rural? Were they, something in between?
Yeah, I've worked in all of them. Our particular school system here, where I'm on the board now, we're suburban. We're rapidly growing. We're right outside Charlotte, and our makeup now is we have a lot of Asian students, African American, Hispanic, white. But we also have, like, the closer you get to Charlotte, it's very suburban. On the side of the county away from Charlotte, it gets much more rural. So we have a mix of all that. And when I tried to retire, I was not very good at retiring. They kept calling me back to do interim work. And so I worked at it seemed like every school in the system, or some more than once, filling in, between administrators and that type of thing. And it was interesting how, again, going back to that Thomas Jefferson quote, there were certain core things that every school benefited from, certain values and principles. But every school was different. Every school, because of that, that makeup. For example, there were certain schools in our system where the parents had education was a huge value in the home, where the other one, getting ready for the world of work, was more important. And so, again, there were core values that the one thing everywhere I worked, the one thing I think the parents are constantly saying or asking, do you care about my kid? Do you care about my kid? They may not even be verbalizing that, but that's what they're assessing all the time. Do you really care about my kid? And there's not a way I can tell a teacher to do that because it has to be authentic. It can't be cookbook. It has to be authentic. But you've got to figure out a way to let that kid know that you love them and you want what's best for them. And if I try to do cookie cutter, that does not. Kids, I think even more so than adults, pick up on that inauthentic kind of facade. So I think that's one of the things that and when the parents come in and they're upset, if you listen to them long enough, that's really the core problem. They don't think you care enough about their kid. If they do, they'll overlook a lot of mistakes, I found. They'll overlook a lot of well-intentioned, you want what's best for the kid, but you just made a mistake. They'll overlook a lot of that if they feel like, yeah, you messed up or we made a mistake or something like that. But you had good intentions. You wanted what's best for Johnny or Susie.
Yeah. And that's something you can't teach a teacher.
No. I had teachers, and I should have mentioned when talking about when I was being raised, because of our situation, teachers were critical in my development. I mean, we all had super influential teachers, but they filled a gap in my tutelage that I needed, and they were very big influences on me. I'm sure that's one reason I went into teaching, because I so valued that relationship. But I had teachers as a principal and as a student that showed their love language was having expectations so high, higher than you had for yourself. And that was their way of, raising the bar in that, I know you can reach that bar. I know you can do this. And then you have others that just love you to death. Just, I recently we have a high school nearby that's celebrating their 100th year anniversary, and I just emceed a little ceremony, and they brought back some teachers, and there was one teacher in particular that, after the program, there was a line. I mean, it was longer than the actual program of people couldn't wait to meet this to see this teacher again. He's very vivacious, very, he remembered their name. I mean, he's just so engaging. And that took longer than the program was waiting for everybody to get through the line, because nobody was rushed. He was eager to know about their family, that kind of thing. Those kind of connections are very, very valuable. But again, me telling you how to do that doesn't work. It's got to come from a central place.
So many lessons we can learn from your experience.
Yeah.
I want to, we're going to take our final break, and I want to ask you when we come back about what you see as the future of education. And if you were made king of education, and you could design the perfect school system, the perfect methods, and the perfect system for training kids, what would that look like? So that's your assignment, and you've got about 30 seconds.
All right, very good.
My guest today is Sam Treadaway. This is the Fathering Strong podcast. Stay with us.
Fathering Strong informs, engages, and empowers dads to be their best as fathers. Visit our website, fatheringstrong.com, for a wealth of resources, including informative videos, articles, books, devotionals, courses, research, and more. The Fathering Strong mobile app is a platform that empowers dads to connect with each other for mutual encouragement and support. Download it for free at fatheringstrong.com. And now, back to our conversation on the Fathering Strong podcast.
Thanks for staying with us for this installment of the Fathering Strong podcast. Sam Treadaway is my guest today, and we've been talking parenting, teaching, administrating, and all kinds of things, mostly related to the education. And so I put it to you, Sam. I gave you a challenge and only gave you 30 seconds to come up with an answer. But you've probably thought about this.
Oh,
All right. So King Sam Treadaway, who is sovereign over all of education. Now tell us, what does it look like?
I think one of the things that, if I were the potentate over all of education, I think one of the things I would really consider would be year-round school. Our neediest students lose, and this is clearly backed up by data. Our needier students really struggle in the months off. They come back, they've lost a lot more. Many times their parents are hard at work. They don't have time to take them to the library and do all these other things that some of our students get to experience during the summer. So to be clear, when I say year-round school, I'm talking about school year-round with quarterly breaks of a couple of weeks.
Sure.
I don't
Yeah.
mean literally school round
Yes.
year. I think all students would benefit from that, but especially those that are just the learning loss over the summer is really an impediment, and it's really a vestige to agricultural days when the harvest. I mean, it doesn't make sense anymore, in my judgment. I do think that one of the things that's interesting about schools is we're preparing our students for the future, but schools are very much being held by the past. And when I say that, for example, parents, even the ones that enjoyed school as a student themselves, they really like school to be like what they experienced. Well, the world we're getting our kids ready for now is not the world that, and I was at a conference last week and saw a futurist talking about AI, and I think we keep thinking about AI is going to be 10 years down the road. He made it very clear that it's going to be much sooner than we think, but he also emphasized the importance of core academics. So there is a place for core academics, but at the same time, I'm reminded of when I first started teaching, there was this controversy over the calculator. If you're teaching math,
Yeah.
you give them the calculator and that kind of thing. And I feel like we're there now with screens, but we've also seen the toxicity of screens. We've seen how, especially with our young boys, I'm not know if your audience is familiar with Scott Galloway and the work he's done. Um, in fact, he just wrote a new book. And part of his thing is he looks at data. He's very good at crunching data and making sense out of it. We're losing boys to screens, even more so than girls, and so that's something that we need to address. Um, as an aside, he thinks, and I tend to agree, the role of masculinity for our boys is confusing right now, and that's something that impacts our boys, which means it impacts our girls as well. It's just the idea of what is masculinity in today's society. He has some very strong opinions about that. One of the things that is different in education now is that when Pastor, I don't want to assume your age, but I'm assuming that at one point when you were in class or in school, you went to school in the morning and you left school in the afternoon. And so whatever happened at school usually stayed at school. Nowadays, with social media and everything else, our students are totally immersed in other words, weekends, it's just a continuation of their day. Our students are not even wanting driver's license now because they don't need to drive to interact with folks. They can go to their bedroom and do it. And I say all that because there's a movement afoot to get rid of screens in schools, and so that at least while they're at school, we can work on real social skills, which I think sometimes interviewers refer to those as soft skills, and I would argue those are not soft skills, they're hard skills. They're very important skills, is how to interact with others. And so uh, we've started doing that here, and I think there's a movement afoot. Jonathan Haidt is a researcher also who has been very good at raising that awareness of how screens and social media has really impacted our youth of today, and that we need to do something. So I think that's one of the things in schools I would do. If you have bullying at school now, the weekend's not your savior anymore, because it just continues online.
So, Sam, I heard two things. I heard that as king of education, you would deem that there would be year-round school, and wow, I couldn't agree more with that. And I think that when it comes to the poorest of the children, the most disadvantaged of children, it would really help them because at least at school they know they're going to get meals, and they're going to be taken care of. They're with adults that care about them. When many times these kids are going home to some pretty bad situations and will
Mhm, mhm.
often be hungry over the weekend because there was no school, and so they
Right.
had no meal. Imagine a whole summer like that.
Mhm. Yeah,
Yeah. So I couldn't agree more.
we one of the things I did as a principal is that at our faculty meeting, our end of the year faculty meeting, um, we would always get in a circle and we would say a prayer for our students over the summer. Uh, you know, Lifting them up in hopes that they leave us, they have a great summer, but they come back safe and sound and ready.
Yeah.
One of the things, strictly as an academic part of year-round school, is it would allow during those breaks for more frequent remediation for those that might need a little more help. Or, if they come in for remediation, they're also going to get lunch and those kind of things. And the counselors are going to be there and those kind of things. There's a lot of advantages, I think, to that. That's a good example, though. You talk about that with many parents, and you get a little friction because, wait a minute, my beach trip is always in July,
Yeah.
and that kind of thing. So that's another example of what I was talking about. We're trying to get kids ready for the future, but we're kind of held by the past in some
Yeah.
ways. That's especially true in high school. Everybody loves high school to be like it was when they were in high school, and um, again, the world is a little bit different.
It's a lot different than it was, especially for me because I'm old. So we're going back a long way.
I'm
And
with
as
you.
far as
I'm with you.
yeah, as far as no screens, again, I agree, and more schools are actually putting those rules into place where there are no
Yep.
cell phones allowed in the classroom. They can have them back after, when school dismisses, but not during
Mhm.
class time.
You,
So
you know,
I
you
think those are
know,
good ideas.
Pastor, one of the things that when we first initiated that, I remember the first high school I went to, I try to be in schools as much as I can. And I was talking to a group of students. They were thanking me for that change. They just needed an excuse for the break that they knew they needed, but you got to
Mhm.
have a reason to be different. You know how it is. You got to
Yes.
conform at that age.
Right.
And
Yeah.
so they were actually pleased that they had at least some time away from all of that drama.
Yeah. Yeah. No doubt. I can see that. Sam, it has
Mhm.
been a delight to spend this time with you. I really enjoyed our conversation. You have a lot of wisdom to share, and I love that you have such a clear vision of what you
Well,
think education ought to
thank you,
become.
Pastor.
And
If
you
I could
got you got my
add
vote if we get to elect a king of education.
okay, if I could add one final thing, I am just so pleased that you are stressing fathering as being a verb, not just a noun, but it's a verb.
Yes.
It's uh, sometimes we pray with our mouths, sometimes we pray with our hands and our feet. And
Yes.
so The same is true of fathering. I just appreciate the fact that it's not a noun, it's a verb, it's active. It's frustrating, it's a challenge, but it's so rewarding too. So I just appreciate that you are actively looking at that way of being a father.
And it's ongoing. I mean, we're
And it's
always a
ongoing.
dad.
That's for sure. That's
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you,
It's a
Pastor.
pleasure getting to meet you and getting to hear
Likewise.
your story. And I'm sure that our audience also has
My
enjoyed it
pleasure.
very much. Thank you, folks, for being a part of this edition of the Fathering Strong podcast. We really do appreciate it. Join us next time. We'll have another interesting guest on the Fathering Strong podcast. Thanks.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Fathering Strong podcast. We hope you enjoyed it, were inspired, challenged, and encouraged. By subscribing, you won't miss an episode as you'll receive notifications of each new posting. Go to the Fathering Strong YouTube channel to subscribe. For an informative weekly read, sign up for the Fathering Strong blog posts. Find them at urbanlight.org. Fathering Strong is powered by Urban Light Ministries, a nonprofit Christian organization that has been serving families for nearly 30 years. Charitable gifts by people like you enable us to offer resources free of charge. Go to www.urbanlight.org to give. Thank you. Join us for the next installment of the Fathering Strong podcast.